Well, hello again. This is Philip at thebest3d.com, and continuing to explore some mountain scenes and some animations that we can create. Something like this here, just a quick animation, and it was rendered pretty quickly too. But we can always add more visual realism. And in this tutorial, I just wanted to discuss one little way to add a bit more interesting looking alterations and coloring. As you see here, as I'm zooming in, there is a lot of interesting things, a lot of things that keep the eye perplexed, right? There is more we could do though. We see, for instance, here this snowfield is kind of plain looking, and there is a little bit of shading, and we see some of it here. But we could add a little bit more if we wanted to make it look like a late summer day with a lot of dirt lying on the snow, right? During the summer, you're going to have some of that dust and some of these rocks coming down from the steep cliffs, and especially accumulate along the edge, along the border of the snowfields. In fact, in some areas, the snow will be totally covered, and this is what perhaps this might look like here. But you might want to control that a little bit further. And I wanted to show one technique to do that. So here is a view of the color map, and then that's before, and then here is after. Right, so essentially what I do is I do some jittering and I do some bleeding. Jitter is one of the filters right here. And before I go into it, let me just zoom in a little bit more so we can focus on one particular area, such as this little thing here. And you saw there is already a little bit of jitter, or it appears, but that's really because the snow was applied and varying based on the elevation, but also based on the slope. There's a little bit of a break here, a sudden change in elevation, and so the snow did not get deposited here. Same here for the bigger cliffs. But what I wanted to do is just add a little bit of jitter to that. So go to the filter, noise, and then there's a couple of choices for jitter. Let's go with the simple one. And don't add too much of that, of course, just a tiny little bit, like 1 or 2 units, perhaps 3. But that's too intense, and one thing you need to do then is to undo it with the interactive undo. Right, that's this little arrow here, or you see it here on the filter, fade last action, and then you can fade it away. So you go back to the prior condition, and then just blend it somewhere in between. And if you want a lot of it, you keep it in the higher range, or you do a little bit and you kind of almost undo all of that. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is the photographic filter, and that one is soft. Well, there's a couple. There's the soft contrast improvement, can be really nice, because anything that's really bright and surrounded by bright will remain relatively bright, but anything that's dark, it will kind of bleed over into the brighter areas. And then you control a little bit of how much you want to perhaps let the bright prevail, or disappear, right? Make it even darker. So if you give it a little bit of that, you can also control how far the dark area reaches. You can see here, very subtle, but you can see how it's very close to the edge, or where it's going a little bit farther. And then you can just the level, you can say how much of that you really want. So you can see none of it, all of it, and that's where you see now that, okay, so the snow is going to be pretty bright still here in the middle, far away from the cliffs. But closer to the cliffs, you see a bit of a darkening, a little bit of a coloration. And that is what's going to perhaps give you the impression that there are some dust particles and rocks and other things, together with the jitter, some bigger rocks, and the two together, giving you a nice effect like that. So I'm going to OK on that one, but I want to show you the other one as well, because sometimes you might like this one better, photographic light diffusion. And normally you might do this in the light diffusion mode, where the white is prevailing, but now you want to bleed it dark diffusion, right? And we have the same filters here, by the way, in the timeline. Let me go to that quick. You see filter, photographic is up here somewhere, and there is here we actually separate them between light and dark diffusion. Right, so when we do the dark diffusion mode under photographic filter, light diffusion, and then switch to dark diffusion, that's where you see this nice bleeding of the dark areas into the bright side. Let me zoom into that so we can see it better. Something like this here. So see how bright this is right now? and we want sort of, especially here along the big cliffs, we want that to bleed over and darken the in proximity, right? Only that's what's close to it. So go to light diffusion and make it a little bit darker. Now you could actually do quite a bit of that. That's where you want to experiment a little bit, right? See how different these scenes will look if you give it a little bit more. Also the level, just a subtle touch of it, or really go full. And then also, you could do one at a very long distance and make it low level, and okay that, and then just do that again with the same filter, and it remembers the current settings, but then reduce the radius and make it higher level, so you get sort of a jump in level of darkness very close up here. And then of course the curve itself is also a big control here. That's the bell curve here, how flat or how spiky this distribution is going to be. So play with these parameters a little bit, and make sure you experiment in approximation mode initially to go a little bit faster, but then test it perhaps in precise mode and okay that. So now we have a coloring that's a little bit different. Definitely going to look different. I'm going to go and store this one here, image, store image copy. And so we have this version, and here's again what we looked like initially, just a plain one. Then we had done some changes. Here's another version, and I'm going to go back to okay, I'm going to actually put that one in there, and then I'm going to go back to my main image, and I think I had this one here. Or I still have an animation undo capability here, so I'm going to go back from that animation, and it now has this. So here we go. We can go now and render that. I'm going to go to filter, transform, and this 3D designer. It should remember the most recent settings, and there we go. So now if we zoom in there, we should be able to see a little bit of darkening. Let's find an area with a large. Let's first zoom out here a little bit. Let's get rid of the clouds for right now, and get rid of the fog so we see clearer. Get rid of the ambient occlusion, and then that way we have a clearer picture of where the snow is darkening due to our new color map. So we have perhaps some areas like this one here that we can even brighten it up to really see it lit by the light, and then we get a bit more of that shade change. There you go. So here, if we zoom into that, let me see if I can get the Z value there. Okay. And so it can be subtle at times, but you'll see also, of course, some of it can be washed away if you actually generate a different sediment level and get these to disappear. Then you're not going to see much of them anyway. But if you do have those in the texture map, then that's really good to use. Let's see what else could we do there. Play a little bit on less of the erosion. So okay, I think we see a little bit of coloration here that's due to the proximity. And again, the more you do, the more you'll see perhaps some really extreme weather conditions having put some coloration effect on that, and you get to create the mood that you want for your particular scene. Perhaps you're developing this for a game, or just for some background image on your desktop. So it's sort of different ways to see why you're doing this all in the first place, right? I mean, here's for instance, a very flat appearing. Let me see if we can reduce the coloration. The fairly flat landscape, but you can see those ridges, right? Those are the ones that were making that separation, and suddenly you got the white flat area, and then you have a very steep, and then another flat area, but at higher elevation. So you get different snowpacks there. There. Let's go and fly into this now. So I'm going to go and go back to the timeline editor here, and get myself some 3D designer. There it is. Okay, and Well, let's just choose a. I think we'll use that with the clouds again, and we'll use the fog again. A little bit more of it, not that much. And in fact, a little bit more camera zoom, so we have the closer proximity showing up a little bit earlier. And now we can control the shade, the fog a little bit. There you go. Alright, so okay that. Let's do the very best we can also in ambient occlusion. I think that was in multiply mode. It's a bit dark, so we may want to brighten up the ambient level. And who knows, perhaps the light direction also. Let me move the position over here a little bit to the left. And then I want to change the direction of the light that's casting the shadows. So I'm gonna go have that perhaps in the far back there. I could possibly add a some sort of a spotlight later there too. So we have a bit of this, and some specular there. So let's make sure we get the lighting right. Yeah, here we now have some nice lighting from the side. We see the shadows. Let's make sure we have long shadows, because that always adds to the drama. Okay, I think we're good for this one. Now all we need to do is select the path. So that's the position, the angle. Let's preview this. Let's see if we can have it in such a way that the light will really be shining straight at us. And this is pretty dark, by the way. This is very dark, high contrast. Let's get it up a little bit. That's a little bit too much. Perhaps we can. There you go. Okay, so we keyframe that. And then we'll go to the very end of the animation, in which we will zoom in. But that's getting us into the scene, so we need to go up a little bit to stay afloat and above it. And so what we could do is go all the way here to about this level there and keyframe that. So now we have two keyframes, and we can go anywhere in between to see if that's good. Do we want to have any sort of rotation to that? Do you want to have any sort of, swaying sideways, and then coming here, swaying the other way? Come there. And so then that way it looks like we're going a little bit zigzag left and right. Keep going that way. Alright, now I think this is a little bit too dark, so I'm going to middle click on this preview to get back into the editor and see if I can do a little bit more brightening here. Alright, or perhaps instead of using the ambient occlusion in multiply mode, I could use it in additive mode. That I'm sure is going to make it significantly brighter in the area of the dark shaded areas here, because we have a fairly bright background. So we should see, yep, there it is. Now we see quite a bit of brightening up here in there. All right, so let's go and render that. And we have the highest level of anti-aliasing here on this particular setting right now. So it's going to take about, 5 to 10 seconds per frame. And we have a total of 110 frames being rendered. So we can calculate this to probably take about 600 seconds, 10 minutes to render. Let's see. Let's go from one frame to the next one. There. Coming up now. Okay, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi, 6 Mississippi, 7 Mississippi, 8 Mississippi, 9 Mississippi, 10 Mississippi. Up there it is, about 10 seconds. And of course that will vary a lot by the speed of the system, speed of the graphic card in particular, since this is rendering on the GPU for the most part. I think the clouds are not, but much of the other rendering is done on the GPU. And so if you have a very high-end graphic card, like a gamer PC level graphic card, or high-end CAD CAM, those with about 2,000 or 3,000 GPU cores, those are going to be a screamer. You'll probably do this in real time. But here I'm gonna laptop with, I think, a second generation i7. It's about 4 years old, so then the graphics card is the same thing, 4 years old. Not the very fastest anymore by today's standards, but still produces beautiful work. And I'll show you at the end of this tutorial sort of the final render, and I'll also do a motion predicted interpolation to make it even slower without having to render again for 10 minutes or whatever it's going to take. Because I mean, that's the thing here, you're looking at 10 seconds per frame, and you're doing a nice fly into the scene or a panoramic sweep or something like that. Not too fast, but also could be slower. And you have enough patience to render perhaps 3-4 minutes worth of frames. And then you look at it and you say, oh shit, pardon my French there, you probably need more frames to make it slower. That frame interpolation, that motion estimation is something that you can do right there in Dog Waffle Howler and produce the missing frames, so to speak, without much of the texture aliasing or scintillation or strobing effects that you tend to see if you do just a plain frame blending to fill in the extra frames. So the motion predicted transform or motion predicted interpolation with morphing from one to the next frame is going to get you usually better quality on that interpolation, and so you can make very slow transitional animations even without having to render all of the material, as long as the frames you render don't have too much significant changes from one to the other. It can usually figure it out and provide the missing frames in between by motion predicted interpolation. Alright, so thanks for watching again. We'll talk to you later on some other tutorials and tips and tricks. And I hope this was useful. Go have some fun with adding some dirt, so to speak, on those cliffs and snowpacks by using some of these techniques that bleed the dark side into the bright sunny side.